Sergeant Emily Rhodes had spent years serving as a Marine, her life defined by discipline, resilience, and unshakable loyalty to her comrades. But there was one companion who stood out more than the rest: Max. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a partner, a protector, and a constant source of support during the most challenging missions overseas. Emily and Max shared an unspoken bond, forged in the fires of combat, where every glance, every movement, and every breath was in sync. Max was more than a military working dog. He was a lifeline. During long patrols, he guided Emily through the harshest terrains, alerting her to dangers before they could be seen or heard. Together, they faced life-threatening situations, never once faltering in their duty. Max's sharp instincts and loyalty kept Emily safe when she had no other defense, and in return, Emily always kept him close, offering him the same protection, love, and care that he had given her. When it came time for Max to retire, Emily felt a mixture of emotions. On one hand, she was happy for him. He had earned his rest after years of service. On the other hand, the thought of losing him, of him being sent to an unknown place, left her heart heavy. She filed the adoption papers without hesitation, certain that Max would be by her side for the rest of her life. But, as fate would have it, a mix-up in paperwork sent Max to another handler. Emily was devastated. For months, she searched for him, making calls to the military and to animal shelters, doing everything she could to track him down. But despite her best efforts, Max was nowhere to be found. The pain of not knowing where Max was, of not knowing if he was safe, was unbearable. She poured herself into her work with veterans and rescue animals, but a part of her heart remained empty. Every dog she helped, every story she heard about K9 companions, reminded her of Max. She couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, Max was waiting for her. She just had to find him. As the years passed, Emily continued with her life, but the memory of Max never faded. It was always there, lingering in the back of her mind, in every quiet moment, in every new dog she worked with. She couldn't move on, not truly. The bond they had shared was far too deep, and she refused to give up on the hope that they would be reunited one day. It was more than just a mission. It was a promise she intended to keep. Years passed, and Emily's life moved forward, though her heart never fully healed from the separation. She threw herself into her work with veterans, training rescue dogs and finding homes for animals in need. But no matter how busy she kept herself, Max was always there in her thoughts, his face a constant presence in her mind. There wasn't a day that went by without her wondering where he was and if he was okay. Then, one morning, just when she had started to lose hope, she received a message that would change everything. It was a brief note from a former military contact, someone who had been part of her team during her deployment. The message was simple, almost cryptic. "I think I saw a German shepherd near a dump site on the edge of town. Looks like the dog might be Max. You should check it out." Emily sat still for a long moment after reading the message, unsure if she was reading it correctly. Could it be him? Max? After all these years, was it really possible? The idea of him being alive, even if he had suffered through hardship, sent a rush of emotion through her chest. She thought about every possibility. A mistake in the paperwork, someone else thinking Max was another dog, or worse, Max left to survive on his own in the wild. The uncertainty made her stomach churn. Without hesitation, Emily grabbed her coat, threw on her boots, and prepared for the journey. She knew she couldn't waste any more time. The lead wasn't confirmed, but it was the closest thing to a breakthrough she had gotten in years. Her heart beat faster as she gathered her things, leaving no room for doubt. This was her chance to finally reunite with the one living creature who had never left her side, the one who had kept her safe when the world was at its most dangerous. The site she was given was a rundown, remote area at the outskirts of town, a garbage dump full of discarded waste, broken machinery, and rusted metal. It seemed like the last place she'd find anything but trash. But Emily wasn't about to let that stop her. She knew Max. She had worked with him long enough to know that if he was alive, he'd be somewhere hiding, waiting for help, somewhere no one else would think to look. With hope driving her forward and adrenaline coursing through her veins, Emily set out to search the area. She didn't know what she'd find, but the possibility of seeing Max again was enough to keep her going. It was more than just a lead. It was a chance, the only chance she'd had in years to bring him home. The garbage dump stretched out before Emily, a desolate landscape of discarded trash and forgotten debris. The air smelled of rot, a mixture of old food, decaying waste, and industrial fumes. Emily pushed past the stench, her eyes scanning the area, searching every corner, every pile, praying that the lead was real. Her boots crunched over the broken glass and metal, but her ears were tuned for the faintest sound that might indicate the presence of a dog. As she moved deeper into the dump, her mind raced. She called out Max's name softly, her voice carrying a mix of hope and fear. "Max? Max, it's me. Emily." She wasn't sure what she expected. She didn't know if he would even recognize her after all these years, or if he was even alive at all. But she couldn't give up. Not now. Not when she was this close. Her heart skipped a beat when she noticed something out of place. A small movement behind a pile of broken pallets and tangled sheets of metal. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Was it him? Could it be? Slowly, cautiously, she approached the area, her eyes widening with anticipation. Then, through the gaps in the metal and the piles of debris, she saw him. A familiar face, but one that was thinner, weaker, and covered in dirt. Max. It was him. He lay motionless, barely moving, his body hunched under the weight of his suffering. His once bright eyes were dull, clouded with pain and exhaustion. His fur, once sleek and strong, was now matted and dirty. But there was no mistaking it. It was Max. Her heart pounded in her chest as she knelt beside him, reaching out to touch his head gently. His body trembled under her hand, and for a moment, Emily's own tears welled up. She couldn't believe it. After all this time, Max was here. He had survived. "Max, I'm here, buddy," Emily whispered, her voice breaking as she spoke. His tail gave a slight, barely noticeable twitch, but it was enough. It was enough to let her know that he hadn't forgotten her, that despite the time and the hardship, he still remembered her. Emily felt a surge of emotion, relief, joy, and heartache all mixing together. Max, her loyal companion, had been through hell. She couldn't imagine the pain and fear he had endured, alone in the world. But in that moment, she promised herself she wouldn't let him suffer any longer. She would get him the help he needed, no matter what it took. Carefully, Emily gathered Max into her arms, cradling him against her chest. He was so light, so fragile, but she could feel the spark of life still there. They had found each other again, and she wasn't going to let go this time. The journey wasn't over, but for now, the reunion was enough. Max was alive, and so was the bond between them, stronger than ever. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she carefully lifted Max, cradling his frail body in her arms. His weight was nothing now compared to the strong, confident K9 she had once known, but the warmth of his body in her arms brought an overwhelming sense of relief. He was alive. That was all that mattered in that moment. She moved as quickly as she could, her eyes scanning the trash-strewn land, but her mind focused only on getting Max to safety. She didn't waste any time. With the determination of a Marine on a mission, Emily rushed back to her car, her pulse quickening with every step. Max's breathing was shallow, but it was still steady, a sign of life. Emily's hands trembled as she buckled him into the passenger seat. She couldn't stop talking to him, whispering reassuring words, even though she wasn't sure if he could hear her. "Hang in there, Max. We're almost there. Just a little bit longer, buddy." The drive to the nearest emergency vet felt like an eternity. Every minute was a lifetime. The roads blurred in front of her as she focused solely on the dog next to her. willing him to stay strong. When they finally arrived at the animal hospital, Emily rushed Max into the clinic. The staff were quick to react, immediately preparing to assess his condition. Emily didn't let go of his side for a second. Her eyes locked on him as the medical team worked. She watched as they hooked him up to IVs, checked his vitals, and began assessing the damage. The vet, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Jensen, looked up at Emily with a solemn expression. "He's in rough shape," she said gently, but there was a flicker of hope in her voice. "He's severely dehydrated, malnourished, and has a few injuries, some old, some recent, but we're going to do everything we can." Emily nodded, her throat tightening as she fought back tears. She had been in dangerous situations before, but nothing had ever felt like this. The love she had for Max, the bond they shared, was a force that drove her beyond fear. She had seen comrades fall in combat and had made peace with those losses, but she couldn't lose Max. Not now. Not after everything they had been through together. As the hours passed, Emily sat by Max's side, her hand resting gently on his head. She talked to him about the good times they'd had, their first mission together, the moments of quiet after a long patrol, and the way they'd celebrated each small victory. She told him she would never leave him, that they would finish their journey together. Max's steady breathing was the only sound in the room, but it brought her a sense of peace. She knew he wasn't giving up, and neither would she. Soon, the waiting room filled with visitors who had heard the story, people who had followed their journey online, people who had prayed for Max's survival. Emily hadn't realized how many lives their story had touched, but the overwhelming support was a reminder of the strength of the bond between humans and animals. They were not alone. And with that thought in her mind, Emily stayed by Max's side, prepared for whatever came next. She wasn't leaving him. Not this time. Max's condition remained critical, but as the days passed, Emily began to notice small signs of improvement. The steady drip of IV fluids and the careful medical attention had begun to revive him. He wasn't out of the woods yet, but every sign of recovery felt like a victory. Emily refused to leave his side, staying with him through every procedure, every test. Her eyes never strayed far from his, always watching for the slightest sign that he was getting stronger. As Max continued to fight for his life, the story of their reunion began to spread. It started with a simple social media post, an update on Max's condition, and a heartfelt message from Emily about the bond they shared. What happened next took everyone by surprise. The post went viral. People from all over the world, many of whom had never heard of Emily or Max before, began to share the story. The photos of Max, frail but alive, touched something deep within the hearts of strangers. Support flooded in from every direction. Donations, messages of encouragement, and offers to help cover the veterinary bills. Emily was overwhelmed by the response. People didn't just see a dog recovering from injury. They saw a symbol of hope, resilience, and unconditional love. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, Emily and Max became national news. Their journey, their bond, had captured the attention of a nation. Local schools and community groups reached out, wanting to send cards and messages of support. People began posting their own stories about their military canines, recounting tales of loyalty and bravery. Max's story had reminded people of the deep connections they shared with their animals, especially those who had served alongside them in the military. Max's fight wasn't just his own. It had become a collective effort, a reminder of the sacrifices made by both soldiers and the animals who served beside them. Emily watched all of this unfold, amazed at the outpouring of love and care from people she'd never met. She had always believed in the power of community, but this was something else. It was more than just a story. It was a movement, and it was all because of Max, because of their bond, their loyalty to each other, and the belief that no one should be forgotten. As the days turned into weeks, Max's health improved steadily. He was still far from fully recovered, but his eyes were brighter, his movements less stiff. And every time Emily spoke to him, He responded with a small, hopeful wag of his tail. It wasn't much, but to Emily, it was everything. The nation watched, waiting for the day when Max would stand tall and strong again. The updates were shared, the prayers continued, and the love from people who had never met her or Max kept Emily going. She wasn't just saving her canine. They were both giving hope to a world that needed it more than ever. Max's recovery was slow but steady, each small victory building on the last. Emily could see the changes, even if they were subtle at first. The days in the hospital turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, Max became stronger. His once shaky legs began to carry him with more confidence, and his eyes, though still tired, started to regain the spark of recognition that Emily had missed so much. It was as though the more time they spent together, the more Max remembered the life they had once shared. Emily stayed with him around the clock, refusing to leave his side, even when the hospital staff assured her that Max was out of immediate danger. She would sit by his bed, talking to him, holding his paw, or gently brushing his fur. She even brought his favorite blanket from home, letting the familiar scent soothe him. As each day passed, Max seemed to understand more of what was happening. He would respond to Emily's voice, lifting his head and wagging his tail with increasing frequency. It was small, but it was progress, and Emily cherished every single moment of it. One day, just as Emily was about to leave for a quick break, she saw Max attempt to rise from his bed. He stumbled, his legs still weak, but there was something in the way he tried that made her heart soar. He was trying to stand. Emily rushed over, kneeling beside him and gently coaxing him to his feet. He wobbled, but with Emily's support, he finally managed to steady himself, standing tall for the first time since they'd been reunited. It wasn't perfect, and Max still had a long road ahead, but it was enough to make Emily's heart swell with pride. "It's just the beginning, Max," she whispered, smiling through her tears. "We're going to make it, together." Word of Max's recovery spread like wildfire. Every day, people who had followed their journey sent messages of support, each one more heartfelt than the last. Some sent photos of their own pets, others shared stories of their military dogs, and many expressed their gratitude for Emily's unwavering dedication to Max. It became clear that their story had resonated far beyond the local community. People from across the country, and even from around the world, had become invested in their bond. But it wasn't just the public support that kept Emily going. It was the love she felt for Max, the knowledge that he was fighting just as hard as she was. With every day that passed, she saw his strength returning, not just physically, but emotionally. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a glimmer of hope. Max was no longer the same dog she had found in that dump. He was healing. He was coming back to her. As Max grew stronger, Emily knew they weren't just healing together. They were becoming a symbol of resilience, a testament to the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. They had faced the darkest of times, but now they were looking toward a future that was brighter than either of them had dared to imagine. As Max continued to regain his strength, Emily realized that their journey was far from over. They had been through so much together, the battles, the pain, the loneliness. But now, they were ready for something bigger. They had become symbols of resilience, and Emily knew they could do more with their story than just heal. Together, they could give back to the world that had given them so much support. Inspired by their experience, Emily decided to start a nonprofit organization dedicated to reuniting military dogs with their handlers. She called it Paws of Duty. The organization's mission was simple but powerful: to ensure that retired canines who had served alongside military personnel would never be forgotten. Max's story had touched the hearts of so many, and Emily was determined to turn that momentum into a force for good. Max became the face of the nonprofit. He was no longer just her loyal companion. He was an ambassador for all the canines who had served their country, many of whom were now in need of homes, medical care, or simply the love and companionship they deserved after years of dedicated service. People who had followed their journey online began reaching out to help, offering donations, volunteering, and spreading the word about Paws of Duty. Emily and Max traveled to schools, veterans' hospitals, and military bases to raise awareness about the importance of supporting military canines. The nonprofit quickly gained attention, with schools hosting fundraisers and local businesses donating goods and services. Max's calm demeanor and gentle presence made him a beloved figure at every event they attended. People were moved by the bond he shared with Emily, and they could see the profound impact that military dogs had on their handlers. At one event, a young boy approached Emily, holding a photo of his own military dog. "My dog came home from deployment, but he's really sick," the boy said quietly. "I don't want him to be alone like Max was." Emily knelt down to his level, touched by his words. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly. "It's important to remember that these dogs gave everything for us, and now it's our turn to give back." Max's story was now more than just about him and Emily. It had become a beacon of hope for others. As their nonprofit gained momentum, they were able to facilitate reunions between other military handlers and their retired canines, ensuring that no dog would ever be forgotten or left behind. It wasn't just about rescuing animals. It was about honoring the deep, unbreakable bond between soldiers and the canines who had served alongside them, protecting them through some of the darkest times of their lives. Every time Max walked into a room, his tail wagging and his eyes full of life, Emily knew they were making a difference. Their mission was far from complete, but together, they were changing lives. One canine, one reunion, one story at a time. Years passed, and Max grew older. His once energetic strides had slowed, his silver muzzle a testament to the years of service and love he had given. But even in his golden years, Max never lost the spirit that had made him such a special dog. His bond with Emily had only deepened, and together they had built something far more significant than either of them could have imagined. The nonprofit, Paws of Duty, had grown into a nationwide movement, helping countless military canines and their handlers reconnect after their service. Emily and Max had spoken at countless events, met with veterans and their dogs, and shared their story with a world that had embraced them. They had become symbols of hope and resilience, not just for military personnel, but for everyone who understood the power of loyalty, love, and the bond between humans and animals. In the quiet moments, when Max was resting beside the fireplace or lying at Emily's feet, she often found herself reflecting on the journey they had shared. They had been through so much: the battlefield, the heartache of separation, the joy of reunion, and yet their bond had withstood it all. Max had been more than a companion. He had been her protector, her confidant, and her best friend. The thought of the years they had spent together filled Emily with gratitude and love. One afternoon, as the sun set over the horizon, Emily sat on the porch with Max by her side, a blanket covering his aging body. She watched as he lifted his head, his eyes still alert, still full of that unwavering loyalty that had carried them both through some of the toughest moments of their lives. "You've done so much for me, Max," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We've done so much together. I don't think I could ever thank you enough." Max looked up at her, his tail giving a slow wag, and Emily smiled. She knew that there was no need for words between them anymore. Their bond had always been more than that. It was in the quiet moments, the shared looks, the comfort they gave each other in times of need. They didn't need to say anything. They understood each other completely. Max had been through so much, but so had Emily. And together, they had created something extraordinary, a legacy that would outlive them both. Paws of Duty would continue to thrive, helping other military canines find their homes, their handlers, and their peace after service. But it wasn't just the organization that would carry on their story. It was the love and loyalty that Max had shown every single day of his life. As the years passed, and Max's health began to decline, Emily made sure he was always comfortable. The once vibrant canine had become her quiet companion in his final years, and she cherished every moment they still had together. And when the time came to say goodbye, Emily knew that Max would leave behind a legacy that touched countless lives, a legacy of love, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond that had brought them back together. Max had found his peace, and Emily had found hers, knowing that their story would continue to inspire, to heal, and to remind everyone of the incredible bond between a soldier and their K9. Their love would live on, forever a symbol of resilience, hope, and the lasting power of loyalty.